60 Minutes Overtime.
I think it's very important that people in the free world remember that Putin is a murderer, that he personally orders the murders of his political opponents.
This week on 60 Minutes, we speak with Vladimir Kara-Murza, the Russian opposition leader who was released from solitary confinement in Siberia as part of this summer's prisoner exchange with Russia. It's the third time he's spoken with 60 Minutes, and all three conversations are notable because none of them should have happened. The broadcast first met Kara-Murza in 2016 after he says he was poisoned by Vladimir Putin's henchmen.
Doctors told my wife that it's only going to be about 5% chance that I'll survive. So I'm very happy and very grateful to be here today and to be speaking with you.
Less than a year after that conversation, he says he was poisoned again.
They said to me honestly, doctors in Russia, they told me the third time is going to be the last. You're not going to survive this thing the third time. So,
to get to his third conversation with 60 Minutes, Vladimir Kara-Murza has done more than just survive. He continued to make public statements criticizing Putin and later the Russian invasion of Ukraine, earning him a 25-year prison sentence for treason and a 2024 Pulitzer Prize. Kara-Murza won the award for columns he wrote for The Washington Post, dispatches that he penned while detained in Russian prisons. You were sent to prison for your words. How is it that the Russian authorities let you write for The Washington Post?
Because I was already in there. That was the goal. I was in solitary confinement in a strict regime prison in Siberia with a 25-year sentence. What else could they have done to me?
Why not silence you completely?
Well, I think you'd have to ask them that. But actually, if you go back to the history of prisoners of conscience, of political prisoners in Russia, many of them actually wrote some of their most significant pieces of work while they were in prison.
Kara-Murza explained to us how he got his essays out while still in confinement. The process began with letters he received behind bars.
There is now an electronic letter system in Russian prisons, in this modern-day gulag. Letters would be brought to the prisoner, and they would come with a sheet for a response, where you would write, obviously, with a pen only, pen and paper. And then I would give that to the prison officials, and they would send it back to the person to whom I was responding. Needless to say, all those letters go through the prison censorship system, so they are read by the prison officials. Usually it would be my wife, Evgenia, who would write to me, and she would always attach extra sheets of paper for the response, and I would write it there and I would send it.
You would write an essay on the paper that your wife sent you in her letter.
Yes.
And you wrote, "Honey, send this to the Washington Post"?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
As simple as that.
Yeah, and sometimes they wouldn't get through, but other times they would. And it's important to say that the censorship system, it's a case of one hand not knowing what the other one's doing very often.
What percentage would you say actually got through? Did some not get through?
I would say surprisingly most actually did.
Uncensored? Or did they have black lines drawn through them?
Uncensored.
Mm-hmm.
But also, and this is an important part of the response to your question, Evgenia and I have been together for more than 20 years. We, as the phrase goes, we finish each other's sentences. She knows me better than anybody else knows me in the world. And so sometimes I would express myself in such a way that would pass through prison censorship, but she knew exactly what I was actually saying. And so she would just,
fix it,
replace a word to make it the one that I was actually meaning to write, but couldn't because of the prison censorship. And every time she got it exactly right.
Whether he was awaiting his fate in Moscow or being held in solitary confinement in Siberia, Kara-Murza told us no one in the Russian prison system ever prevented him from writing.
I think for the regime in the Kremlin, What is most important is to punish their opponents, to punish them physically, to isolate them from their families, not to allow them to speak to their children, to send them away into Siberia, to keep them locked up, which is what they did to us. What we wrote in letters, I don't think they cared much about.